knowledge and experience with us. So I'm gonna let you take it from here, brother. You're gonna be able to talk about yourself a whole lot better than me.
Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
Very good. I see you learned something already. Very good. We may want to get that door. Can I get somebody to use the door? All right. So as Brother Al mentioned, we met. It was at the Du Bois Center, right?
Yeah, well, we met up in Aburi first.
Aburi before that was before that.
Okay, when we initially met, and we were having that chat up there, but we was talking about citizenship. And then we met next at the diaspora afterward.
Good. Yeah, so the feeling's mutual. Brother Al, known him for, a couple years now. I know he has the Hope Foundation. One of my students actually works very closely with him, who's an architect, deals with eco-architecture, all types of things all throughout the continent. So I know that he supports that type of work, and really a good brother. Now, when I say Sankofa, let's try that. Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Now you may have heard that word before. Now the pronunciation is Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Ko. Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Very good. So when I say Sankofa, that translates to san is to return, ko is to go, and then fa is to take. So it's basically return back to take what was left behind. And it comes from a proverb, Surefino Sankofa Yinchi. And it translates to if you forget and you go back and take it, it's not tabooed, it's not hated to do that. Alright. So the last part is Yinchi is saying we don't taboo it, right? It's not something that's off limits for you to do that. So when I say Sankofa, I want you to say Yenchi. Can y'all do that?
Yes.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Now I do that as a strategy called call and response. So that's if I start talking long, you start nodding off, I'll say Sankofa, and then all the people saying Yenchi will wake you up. You say, oh, where was I? Oh, yeah. All right. So it's quite strategic. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and that's actually what the presentation is. I did a presentation just about my experiences studying abroad. I studied abroad here 2000, 2001. My mother first brought me here in '98. She first came to Ghana in 1972, but I'll give you just a little bit of that background as we go into it. Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
That's why I said close the door to make it a little loud. All right, so why Ghana? I'll go into that, a little bit of the introduction. Why CIEE? That's a program that I studied abroad with. Some of my adventures here during that study abroad, first semester, the semester break, second semester, and then some of the outcomes, how that experience really changed my life. Coming to Ghana really changed my trajectory of life, and you see me working here at University of Ghana. You can get a little sense of that right now. Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Sankofa.
Yenchi.
Keep you on your toes. Now a little background here, that this is my great-grandfather on my father's side. He's standing next to a bust of Marcus Garvey. Now has anyone ever heard of Marcus Garvey, first off?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Has anyone heard of the UNIA?
Yes.
Very good. So my great-grandfather was a member of the UNIA, and actually the high-ranking member of the UNIA. So I'll just come from here. And his name was Ferrara Levi Mitchison Lord, out of Barbados. He was born in St. Philip, Barbados. So he moved in 1918 to the United States, settling in Brooklyn, which is where I was born, where he found work in a shoe factory. Hearing about Marcus Garvey and other black radicals, Lord visited Harlem, heard Garvey speak, and joined the movement. Proficient in shorthand, he became a transcriber of Garvey's speeches for the Negro world. In the fall of 1923, together with Alonzo Pettiford, president of the Detroit Division, Lord was awarded the Order of Knight Commander of the Cross of African Redemption. He had assumed the role of Auditor General of the UNIA before being appointed Chancellor in 1923. Lord later helped to found Paragon Credit Union in Brooklyn, which at its height was the largest credit union period in the entire United States. Not the biggest black one, the biggest credit union period. Thousands of members, millions of dollars in assets. So really he carried it forward even after Marcus Garvey was deported and other, in terms of black economic empowerment and some of those types of messages that were there. in that sense. So that's a bit of the connection, because when we think about Marcus Garvey, we think about back to Africa. My great-grandfather wasn't able to physically come to Africa, but for me to be here is a bit of that fulfillment of that vision. And this is him again, along with other people in the UNIA, but that's him. Now, also in the way of background, Sankofa.
Yeah.
Ah, oh, you thought I forgot, or I thought you forgot. Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Very good. So my mother, Dr. Mawia Kamban, a psychologist, in 1972, she came to Ghana with Nana Dinizulu. I don't know if you all may be familiar with that name. Has anyone ever heard of Nana Dinizulu? Right. So Nana Dinizulu is one of those who is most well known for bringing the Akan spiritual tradition back to the U.S. Now, there were retentions from enslavement of Akan, of Yoruba, of all these ethnic groups and their spiritual systems, what they used to call the old-time religion. Initially, black people were not given Christianity because the idea was that if you made them Christians, you had to set them free, and they were not trying to set nobody free, right? But they had a movement called the Great Awakening in the early 1800s, and with that, they decided that they can basically get around that clause by saying, oh, well, when we give them Christianity, we freed them in the by and by. We freed them spiritually, so we can keep them in chains, but then we can say that we freed them just by the very act of giving them Christianity, and that's where you had a mass conversion. So all of the Christianity really took off from the 1800s. Before that, people didn't do that. They practiced roots, old-time religion, ring shouts, all those types of things, right, which were retentions. But Nana Dinizulu, Sankofa. Ah, yeah, gotcha. All right, so Nana Dinizulu, he actually came to Ghana and he returned back to the U.S. with the Akan spiritual system intact, began initiating people and things of that nature so that we could return to our own spiritual systems, which were banned really after the Stono Rebellion. Me, myself, I was born at home in 1979, and some of the Akonfo, that's the traditional healers and spirit mediums, they served as midwives, right? So these were people who Nana Dinizulu had initiated, and then they became the midwives from when I was born at home, intentionally. My older sister was also born at home. All my children were also born at home. We don't go to hospital, that we do it ourselves like we've been doing for 7 million years, right? Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Very good. So my mother also began training as an Okonfo, which is a traditional diviner and healer. And with that, she got the name Nana Ifya Santiwa, and that was in 1995 through 96. Now her name, Dr. Mawia Kamban, that when my parents got married, they didn't exchange wedding rings. Some of the ladies are looking like, well, why get married? What they decided to do is look at each other's character, and based on that character that they would give, they would exchange names that really encapsulated what the compliment was about. So my mother gave my father his name, my father gave my mother her name, so her name translates to the essence of life, right? And that's what he saw in her. His name is Kamal, which is a quiet warrior, and both of the names really are, they had some insight into who they were marrying. And then Kamban translates to in the spirit of the people, right? So this was what they did, and they said once we're married, we don't need any type of ring to say, oh, I'm married. If it's done, this is it, right? We don't have to enrich De Beers and the diamond cartels and the blood diamonds in order to show that we are connected for life and beyond. And then my mother also started the Sankofa.
Yes,
Very good. Sankofa journey in 1998, and that was the first time that I came to Ghana. Now, at that time, I had to have been about 19 years old. I was just like, okay, this is mom's thing. All right, okay, I'm just going to go along with it. But between the first one and the second one, I went through a very serious spiritual transformation where I, Sankofa,
Yanchi.
Sankofa,
Yanchi.
Sankofa,
Yanchi.
where I went back to the foundation that my parents had started in me from a young child and really saw the importance of understanding who I am as an African man. Nkwan. When I say Nkwan, that's life. So if someone sneezes, you can say Nkwan. That's life. Very good. Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Very good. So that was 98 to 99. And then my mother became the president of the Association of Black Psychologists, ABPSI, in 2000. And in that year, that entire association had their conference here in Ghana. So the year she was president, they brought about 500 plus black psychologists here to Ghana. So it was a very powerful experience. At the end of that year, at the end of that conference, I decided that I was going to stay on here at University of Ghana for the academic year. So it worked out well because I was at Morehouse College. It was before it became as crazy as it is now. Don't judge me on anything like that. But I was at Morehouse College on a full academic scholarship. So that entire scholarship came here in order to pay for everything. So that was a very, very good deal. And I stayed for the CIEE program 2000-2001. That was my junior year at Morehouse College. Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yanchi.
So first semester I took these classes at UG, language proficiency and Chi. Now because I had already been coming, I was already conversational in Chi. So they decided I didn't have to take the classes with everybody else, that I got one-on-one tutorials with Openia Jikum, who's a very well-known linguist here. I also took Intro to Drumming, Intro to Traditional Dance, 2, African Philosophy and African Traditional Religion, and this one was also taught in Chi. The second semester, so by the second semester, I was good enough that I was able to take classes with native speakers of Chi. Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa? Sankofa. You gotta make sure you're paying attention now. So I took literature of a Ghanaian language, and with that we were reading texts like poetry, novels, plays, all these in Chi, and then writing essays and discussing them in Chi as well. And then use of a Ghanaian language. And with that, it was mainly essay writing, creative expression, things of that nature. State and society in Africa, West African church history, societies and cultures of Africa. Now this one, because I wasn't so interested in church history, I was the only student in that class. So I asked the teacher, can we deal with something else? She said, okay, what do you want to deal with? I said, one, I want this class taught entirely in Chi. She said, no problem. And then I said, I want us to discuss Proverbs, Akan Proverbs in all types of situations. So at the end of that class, I wrote an essay, which was the longest essay I'd written in any language up to that point, entirely in Chi, about Proverbs. It was 42 pages. So I was really into it and highly motivated, as you can see. And it was all because of Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Very good. So in the first semester, I was at ISH, which is an international student hostel. If you see it now, all around there is built up. At that point in time, it was a building surrounded by bushes, right? So if you were hungry at night, you had to walk about a mile or two to the front of the campus to get something to eat. It was just by itself. Now, of course, they have the market there. They know where the money is, so everybody's going to that side. I was washing clothes by hand, which was fun. Conversing about the election. So it was 2000, and there was going to be an election with the porters and security. We were all on great terms because I was like, what's the word for this? What's the word for that? Let's talk about this. I had a roommate who was also from Morehouse, but we didn't get along. I won't go too much into why we didn't get along, but we didn't get along. There were other Morehouse guys in the next room, and I was cool with those two. And then there were ladies from other schools. I won't go too much into that. Oh, what do you think? Again, like I said, Ish was surrounded by bush, and the night market was at the main gate. So we had adventures on our nighttime treks, through the bush, no lights, trying to get something to eat. We went to the dungeons. This is one of the brothers from the other room who I did get along with, Pabana Fusohene. And it was, a very emotional experience going to the dungeons, because this was, sometimes you can even feel, or imagine what your ancestors may have gone through. Have y'all gotten a chance to go to the dungeons?
That's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow? Okay. They will be calling them castles, as though we're in Camelot and there are knights in shining armor and all these things. That was not our experience. So when they say castles, you need to correct them and mention the dungeons, right? first semester activities, we were learning dances such as Agbaja. That's this one when you see the area people doing this one. Asadria, that's where you do this one. Right, very good. Damba, that's where they do the spinning one and they come around. We were going around town to the art center, Asasepa vegetarian restaurant, going to a Kwazide at a Konfona Abbas's place up in Medema. So all of these were part of the Sankofa experience. Oh, you think if I say it in a sentence, you don't have to say it. You have to say it. And then for the semester break, we decided to travel to Burkina Faso and Mali. So the semester break is about a month and change, right? About a month and a half. So you can do some serious moving. We also plan to go to Senegal to visit noted writer Aye Koyama, author of 2000 Seasons, The Healers, and many other books as well. So we were going to do a road trip. So, when you're young, you do a lot of interesting things. So we didn't know anyone in Burkina Faso. We didn't know anyone in Mali, but we decided to hop on these little mini buses and just go there. And we ended up in Ouagadougou. They asked you, okay, where are you coming from? So they asked you in Chi. Because there was a guy, I was like, okay, we're coming from Ghana. So they just hooked us up with a guy who spoke Chi. He took us to the Ghanaian community. There are people who are up there vending and doing whatever. So we went up there and we were sleeping out on the sidewalk at night, just with the people, like, yo, all right, cool. And as I look back, I said, that was probably a little bit dangerous. But, sometimes you're young and you're just having adventures, like, all right, let's roll. Sankofa?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa. Sankofa. And these were the brothers who I was traveling with. This is Kojo Jesse and Kwabanao Fusuhene, and then this is a young me. Same guys, me, and this is at Bonyure, where they do the kente weaving. Sankofa?
Yes.
So Ghana, Burkina Faso border, you'll see this, bye-bye, safe journey. This is at the bus station there. And we were on our way for a big adventure. This is again at the border. And then we went to Ouagadougou. This is the main market in Ouagadougou, a huge place. Now, whereas here in Ghana, a lot of people wear so-called Western clothes, white clothes, so forth and so on. It was striking that Burkina Faso, even when they're on mopeds, a lot of the women were fully decked out in African garb. That was one. And also it was very highly polluted. So people are walking around and they're wearing surgical masks because of the pollution, a lot of smoke there. So all of those were different. And then the architecture feels more African there in Burkina Faso. Here it's a lot of colonial mentality that goes into the architecture. Let's just try to be like the British. There they had, seemingly at least expressed in the architecture, more of a pride in being African, at least in that area. Sankofa?
Yes.
This is at Bobo Dioulasso, and this is with a guy named Fuseni who we met there. So you go to Ouagadougou, that's on the eastern side of Burkina Faso, and then then from there you go to Bobo Dioulasso, which is I think the second biggest city inside of Burkina Faso. So he met this guy just on the street. He said, "Oh yes, I'll help you. I'll be your guide." He ended up stealing the money of the other guy. So that's an adventure and a story in and of itself. He got arrested by the police. It was a whole big thing. And the other guy who we're traveling with, every couple of days, he came down with malaria. He came down with malaria. So we were using neem leaves to treat it. Now, neem should also be used. There's another plant called ashoka, another tree called ashoka. And if you can get both of those in, it will just kill the malaria altogether. All we could get was a neem. So it would go down, but then it would flare up, a few days later. But it also made the journey quite interesting. Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Yes.
More energy. Sankofa?
Yes.
Very good. And then we went to Bamfora Falls. This is the other brother, Kojo Jesse, who I mentioned got his money stolen, but he was still in good spirits, and he was also the one who kept getting sick. So it was beautiful, these waterfalls. You go there, there's a river there, and you walk through all these ancient trees, hundreds of years old, and it's just a very serene experience, right? So we got into the river, we were having fun, yeah. And this is it. So you see us here in the river. We're actually all wearing clothes under there, so don't be looking too hard at the picture. There we go. And that's Bamfora. Sankofa!
Yenchi.
Sankofa!
Yenchi.
Sankofa!
Yenchi.
So you see we were having fun. And then we went on to Mopti Sebare. And this is in Mali, so this is a mosque. These are actual pictures that we took while we were there. This is a mosque there. They have these very ancient mosques made out of mud. And it doesn't rain very often there, so these mosques have been there, some of them for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And this is now what they call sustainable architecture, eco-building, and so forth and so on. And a lot of these people come to Africa to learn it, then they become experts in New Mexico and Arizona saying, yes, we know all about sustainable architecture, building with this, building with wood, and so forth. Beautiful greenery there as well. And then we also decided to go to Dogon country. Has anyone ever heard of the Dogon people? 1, 2. Was that a third, or you were just scratching your head? No problem. Sankofa!
Yenchi.
Sankofa!
Yenchi.
Sankofa!
Yenchi.
So we had read about, or I had read at that time, conversations with Ogo Temeli, which is a Dogon elder who, over the course of several days, went through the entire cosmology of the Dogon people, their concept of the creation story. Every single African people have a creation story, and oftentimes it's just different manifestations of what's one understanding, one worldview. So he, in it he goes into the creation story, into why they do this, why they do that, all the cultural practices. So I say, and the Dogon are most famous for having discovered there is a star called Sirius A and another star called Sirius B. Now Sirius A is probably the brightest star in the sky, but Sirius B can only be seen with a telescope, right? But these people have known about Sirius B before there was anything on the planet called a telescope. And it takes Sirius B 60 years to go fully around Sirius A, right? So here it's 365 days for the Earth to go around the sun. This smaller star goes around the other star every 60 years. And they celebrate a festival and have been celebrating a festival for over 1,000 years in that location every 60 years to mark the full turning of that star, revolution of that star around the other. So that's pretty, profound. So how did they know about this, right? And know about it to the point that they have it infused in their culture. Sankofa,
Yenchi.
Sankofa,
Yenchi.
Sankofa,
Yenchi.
Sankofa,
Yenchi.
Sankofa, 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 Sankofa,
Yenchi.
Sankofa. Very good. So we decided to go see these magical Dogon people. And it was interesting that to get there, so you have to drive on just open terrain for about 2 or 3 or more hours. I lost track of time. And as you're doing that, there's no air conditioning in the car, so all of this red dirt is just kicking up and is getting on you. So by the time you get out of the car, you are fully red, right? So you shake it all off once you get down, and you have to walk for about 30 minutes before you get to an escarpment, like a cliff like this. So we're up there, we're carrying our bags on our heads, we're just moving, getting it. All right, let's go, let's go. So then we get up to the top, but then when you get to the top, you're not done, because then you have to descend and go down into a valley like this, where there's all this agriculture, they're doing all this, and you're still not there yet. So you have to walk for about another hour before you get to another ridge like this that you climb up. So you climb up the ridge, that's a good another maybe about 45 minutes, hour, and then you walk again on the ridge, and eventually in the distance you see a tiny village, right? So as I'm going there, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna see real Africa. You're around Accra, it's like, this is like baby United States. You go to the Accra Mall, it's like, what's this? But we're like, yeah, we're gonna go and see the real deal. So as we approached the village, there was an elder who came and walked out to greet us, and he said, hello, my name is George. Would you like some Coca-Cola? You can't make this stuff up. And he said, and if you like, you can pitch your tent in front of the church here. The white people are already here, and they've already pitched their tents. What? These are the Dogon people. This is what you got for me? Oh man, I'm going home. But we stayed there. There was a amazing festival there. And you see one of these white folks who was already there at the festival. And these are all the indigenous people, the Dogon people, and they're there looking at the festival. And the festival was amazing. They have all these drummers, all these dancers. We even got a chance to, get our little dancers. Ain't right. All right, so they have these masked dancers, and all the masks represent different things from their cosmology, from their worldview, from their creation story, right? And it's interesting, I taught a course called Foundations of African Thought, and all of the students were indigenous Africans, Ghanaians. So we got to the creation stories about the Dogon, Yoruba, Congo, so forth. So I asked them, well, what's the creation story of your people? And they said, we've never learned our creation story. All we know is Adam and Eve and a rib and a this and a that. And one who had taken philosophy, he was like, I took philosophy, I'm African. I took philosophy at an African university, and I've never even come across what's my people's creation story. You understand? So what his reflection of that was that it's like the danger of a single narrative. There's a TED talk by Chimamanda, a famous author, where she goes into the danger of a single narrative. If all you know is this one people's story, that has an impact on how you see the world, right? And there's a reason why you don't know your own story and all you know is their story. So, these are, again, the Dogon people. They have very profound concepts and ideas of creation. This is where...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In that Tereli festival,
Right.
is that the one where they have the Arabatics?
Yeah, so they have all that there. So they have the Sigui Festival, which is a bigger festival, and then this one is a yearly festival, and that's a smaller one. So one is every 60 years, and that's the huge festival. This one is an annual. And with that, they have, the ones who are wearing the mask, and they also have those who are on stilts. So some are part of the cosmology, some are part of the sociology. So the ones who are on stilts represent Fulani people, right? So it's like, these are the people who are around. Then there are other things that are more astrological, more cosmological, and those types of deals, right? So this is where the elders meet, basically the equivalent of an Mbongi. This is the mask that represents that star that goes around every 60 years. So what he does, and this is, I couldn't even get it. I had a panoramic camera, and I couldn't get the whole mask. But what they do is that they take this mask that reaches up to about the second floor, and the guy goes like this, and then he goes all around with this long, long mask, and it represents this revolution of the star going from here 60 years, and then finally making that, that meeting. And these are some of the elders, these are some of the hunters, and a young boy who's an aspiring hunter. The granary and all these things are discussed in conversations with Ogutumeli, and then later I read the Pale Fox, and it's in there as well. Sankofa!
Yanchi!
Sankofa!
Yanchi!
Sankofa!
Yanchi!
Sankofa! 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 I'm not even saying anything. Sankofa!
Yanchi!
Very good, gotta keep y'all on it. And I thought this was a very beautiful profile picture, the elders and then the youth, right, side by side. And again, all this is at the Dogon Festival. Now, when we went to Bandiagara, so from Mopti, we went to Bandiagara, which is basically Bamana country, the Bambara people. And then we went to Dogon country. When we came back, there was a lunar eclipse, right? Which was very interesting because when you read about the Dogon, everything is about the stars and the moon. So for us to be there and catch a lunar eclipse, it was just very profound, very good timing, right? And at Bandiagara, it's the clearest I've ever seen stars in my life. I've seen countrysides, I've been different places, but the way the architecture is that the roofs are flat. So you climb up a ladder and then you go up on the roof, and then people just chill out there at night, on mats, and then they're just looking up at the stars. So I went up on the roof, and when you get up there, it's more like the stars are around you than above you. It feels like you can do this and just grab a handful of stars. And there are stars that you recognize like Orion, right? It's the 3 stars in a row. And I knew that constellation, but there are so many constellations behind that constellation I had never seen before. And every minute, there's something moving in the sky. You don't even get a sense, like if you're in a crowd, you don't get a sense that the sky is alive with movement every minute. But you see all these just shooting stars, everything is moving, meteorites that are getting burned up in the atmosphere all the time. And I was like, well, no wonder the Dogon people knew all this. It's like you can see everything. You can join the stars, basically. But I thought that was very profound that we were there for that lunar eclipse. And as we were there, people were coming out of their houses with pots and pans. They were banging on their pots and pans saying that they don't fear the eclipse because of Allah. Now what's interesting means I reject your religion. Talking about the Arabs, when they came, they tried to impose Islam, and they were saying our very identity is based on we're not going to allow you to impose your religion on us. But now those exact same people are the ones who are saying because of Allah they don't fear the eclipse. So it lets you know about some changes that are going on. The brother who I mentioned got malaria. Kojo Jesse kept falling ill with malaria, so we cut our journey short in Mali because we wanted to go to Burkina Faso and then to Mali and then to Senegal. But we were like, if this guy dies on the journey, we're going to have some problems. So we decided to go back. So we came back to Ghana, and Kojo Jesse, he also got worms. Not like stomach worms, but worms growing in his leg. And let me tell you about that. Now, he went to a village in the Volta region, and all the people, when they went to the river, they were all wearing flip-flops or wearing something on their shoes. But he was like, hey, I'm free, I'm home. So he decided to walk around barefooted. Now, there's the expression when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. They knew why they were having things on their feet, but he was walking around barefooted, and he came back, and his legs, it looked like holes like this size in his leg that you could stick your finger in up to about the first joint. It looked like somebody shot him with like a shotgun slug, and it got lodged in there. So our Dr. Michael Williams comforted him, but not really, because he had seen people die before. He was the head of the CIEE, which was a program, and he had seen people die of all. Matter of fact, on that in that year, a white girl died. So his comforting was like, all right, buddy. It was very morbid. It was just like, this may be the last time I see. He didn't say that, but like just the way he was talking to him, it was like, you're not helping. You know you're not helping. But eventually he got better, but he still, you know, even after that, years after that, had the remnants of where you could see like these huge, almost like pock marks. You see chicken pox, those are tiny, it was like this, from the worms that were, you know, growing in there and just eating his skin away. That's not as scary, but keep your shoes on if the people there have their shoes on. If they got their shoes off, you say, okay, maybe. But if they got their shoes on, you say, definitely, I'm keeping my shoes on. So in the second semester, I moved off campus, and that was because I didn't get along with my roommate in the first semester. Now, he was only there for one semester, but we had a bit of a conflict that almost got physical. So the dean of students decided that, you know what, we're going to give you your academic scholarship money and you can just stay off campus. I said that was great because I got an inexpensive apartment, and then the rest of the money I was just balling out with. Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Yes.
Sankofa?
Yes.
So that was at Medina Firestone, which is, you know, up the road right here. I was just in the community, so I was just learning Chi with native speakers, so that actually was helpful as well. The second semester, I got to keep the money from my academic scholarship. This is the room where I was staying in. And then they had a place called Lalibela Ethiopian restaurant at Dankwa Circle. And the food there was so good, and at that time the exchange rate was such that if you give the equivalent of like $2 or $3, just tell them I want a mountain. They'll bring you a mountain of food like this, like this. It's like, pile it up. Pile it up. And that was just free money because I was like, I'm on a scholarship. This is just, let's cool out. And in retrospect, I was like, I could have got a car out of that. We could have been moving. I was like, but we had lots of fun, still all the same. Keep it moving. Froze up. Now, some of the outcomes, I repatriated to Ghana in 2008. I got my PhD in linguistics at the University of Ghana, 31st December 2014. And from that, I won the Vice Chancellor's Award for the best PhD thesis in the humanities for the school year 2012-2013. Feel free to clap for me. And that's the very first time that an African from the diaspora has gotten that award. So I also became a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies. I got married in Ghana. Okay.
What was your thesis on?
My thesis was on how a specific type of verb, so it's in linguistics, how a specific type of verb is made into a noun in 3 dialects of Akan. So Akan is the umbrella language, and within Akan you have 3 literary dialects, Asante-Chi, Ekwapim-Chi, and Fanti. So I was showing how in all those different dialects, those types of verbs are made into nouns. Now, the way that relates is that nowadays people don't speak Chi as much as they speak Chinglish. Chinglish, right? There are native speakers of Chinglish, especially here in Accra, where there are so many words that people don't even know anymore, right? So you have to go to dictionaries from the early 1900s to even find the words for some of these before we had our self-esteem beaten down to the point where we say, oh, our language is primitive, we don't know anything. And at that point in time, they're just like, this is a word for this, this is a word for that, this is a word for this. But basically in understanding how verbs are made into nouns, that there can be coinages of new words, right? Because if you look at things that seem very technical, the word electron is coming from electrum, right? Which is basically a combination, it's an alloy of gold, right? So we have that word, you understand? If you actually look at the etymology of all these different scientific terms, the word malaria, it just means bad air. Because at that time they thought that, oh, it's coming just because the air is bad around swamps or whatever. No, it's the mosquitoes in the swamps, right? But we say these things as though these are scientific and technical terms, but a lot of them are either incorrect or they're just so simple that once you understand photosynthesis, right? Photo, light, synthesis, or bringing together of light. So once you understand how simple these things are, then you can look in your own language in order to come up with, you know, similar types of terms, scientific, technical, and otherwise. Baraka baraka. 2 children at that time. This was an older presentation, and now there's a 3rd child. Akosia is there as well. Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yanchi.
Sankofa.
Yeah.
Are the children twins?
No.
Both of them are born on.
No. So Kweku was born on
okay.
Ghana's Independence Day.
Okay.
That's right beside the Kweku.
Okay.
So Ama is 10. She was born in Chicago, also born at home. Hers was a water birth. Kweku was also born at home. And in all the cases, and the youngest one, Akosi, was also born at home. For Ama, the midwife didn't get there in time, so we were the ones who delivered her. For Kweku, the midwife didn't get there in time, so we were the ones who delivered him. I was the one who actually grabbed him. He had the umbilical cord around his neck, just spun that around, sucked the mucus out of his nose. I've been like that since I was young. My sister's like, oh, that's so disgusting. But I actually did have to suck it out. I didn't gargle with it or anything.
Okay.
So he breathed. And the youngest one was born not breathing. She had the amniotic sac around her head. That's what they call born with a caul or a veil. And the old folks know what that's all about. Yep. So, but because of that, some of the fluid had gotten into her nose and gotten into her lungs. So she was born not breathing, just very limp, very pale. So what I had to do, the midwife also didn't get there in time. So,
It's the same midwife?
same as the last 2, same as Kweku's. The other one in Chicago was, of course, a different midwife.
Okay.
Yeah, same midwife. I won't say much. But what I had to do, they have what are called aspirators. It looks like like a little pump thing, a little hand. So what I did is that I realized she had to breathe, of course. So I actually used the aspirator to push air in, right? So I pushed the air in, and as I pushed it in, then as I pulled it out slowly, then it would pull the mucus out slowly. You know, got rid of it, pushed the air in. After about 30 seconds, you can see like a little, that's the most beautiful sound you ever heard in your life, right? And then, you know, we put it over because when you do like CPR and things like that for children, they tell you put them on your lap, you know, face down so that the mucus or whatever, or if anyone's drowning, this is what you do, so that it can, you know, come out. Kept doing it, and then we heard a cry, which is the second most beautiful sound you ever heard. Because, like, literally, if we tried to go anywhere, whatever, she wouldn't have survived, right? She would have been brain dead or just DOA. So, yeah, she survived as well. She's running around talkative as she wants to be. Sankofa!
Yanchi.
Sankofa!
Yanchi.
Sankofa!
Yanchi.
So these are some of the messages from the ancestors that keep us straight.
Do you tell your children those stories?
Oh yeah, yeah. So we homeschool our children as well. So everything is around understanding our worldview, understanding why it is that we do what we do. In our household, we speak Chi. So I've only spoken to my children in African languages. I've never spoken to them in any Eurasian languages. So we speak Chi, we speak Yoruba. We have conversations about why it is we do what we do, why it is we live in Ghana, why it is we're for Black liberation, all those things. Yep. And of course, you know, their birth stories are very much tied. And interestingly, all of their birth stories, like Amma has a birth story, she's the oldest one as well, because she was born in Chicago on January 6th. And Chicago in January is very cold. And I kept joking like she was waiting for it to get warm before she comes out. And the day she came out, it was 66 degrees in January. A record had never been that before, never been that since, right? And literally she was like, all right, if I can't wait for the weather, I'm going to change the weather, right? So we still joke with it if we're going somewhere and if we're doing whatever and we don't want it to rain, we say, I'ma make sure it doesn't rain when we go there. And it doesn't rain. So like she's like Storm, she just got her little magic powers, we roll with it.
Do they know English?
Yeah, yeah. So my wife is born in New York, so she speaks to them in English, and she and I speak in Yoruba, right? And then I speak to them in Chi, speak to them in Yoruba, and now learning Wolof as well.
Why did you choose Yoruba?
You know, I'm in linguistics, and that was one of the languages I studied formally. So when I had finished up at Morehouse, I had taken Medu-Neter. Does everyone know Medu-Neter?
Yes.
So Medu-Neter is what they call hieroglyphs, right? Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some people say hieroglyphics, but ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And my teacher, so this is before I did this study abroad, I studied with Dr. Mario Betty. He's the head of ASCAC. Has anyone ever heard of ASCAC? That's the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, which is at the forefront of Medu-Neter. Now Medu-Neter, that's what the people themselves call their language. Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa?
Yanchi.
Sankofa?
Yanchi.
And Medu translates to words, and then nature translates to divine or of nature, because all of nature was seen as being divine, so these are the words of nature. So when they say hieroglyphics, that's basically a Greek translation of that word. Hiero meaning that which relates to the divine, and then gluphos, that which is sculpted or written. So basically saying like divine words just in Greek. So the people call the language Medu-Neter. So my Medu-Neter teacher, after that year, I came back again to the Medu-Neter class, and I was making all these connections between Medu-Neter and Akan. And he was like, you know what, you're going to grad school for this? I said, you know what, I really don't. He said, you're going. I said, all right, hey, yo, I ain't got no beef. So the year I went to grad school, I looked at the different languages that they had on offer. They had Yoruba. I wanted to take Zulu because I wanted to learn the language of all the people who had defeated white folks in war. So I said, the Battle of Isandwana, yeah, let me learn Zulu. However, the year before was the last year they taught Zulu. The one who was teaching went back or whatever. So the options were Yoruba, Hausa, Kiswahili, Sudanese, Arabic, and I think one other. And all of those have quite an influence of Arabic, right, or English or whatever. And I said, which translates to, you don't run away from the fire ants to go hop into a fire. I'm trying to get away from these white languages, not go to another one. So out of those, I said, let me go for the Yoruba. Now, when I came in, that semester, they were only teaching intermediate Yoruba. They didn't have beginners Yoruba. So I had to go to a summer program called Scali, where they give you funding. They give you something like thousands of dollars to go and learn an African language. I said, that sounds like a deal to me. And they do it every summer, so some of you all can look into that as well. And the Yoruba teacher this is at University of Wisconsin-Madison, she said, okay, you can go to that program, but it's impossible for you to get up to intermediate level after just, what is it, 6 weeks? So she told me that. I said, you don't know who you're talking to. I didn't tell her that, but I was thinking and looking at her like. So I went there for the 6 weeks. By the time I came back and they did the oral proficiency interview, at the end of the interview, she said, okay, we want you to be the teacher's assistant. That's That's what's up.
Right.
And then I ended up becoming formally the teacher's assistant teaching intro Yoruba and intermediate Yoruba at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was doing advanced after the first year at Ibadan in Nigeria, right? So just saying all that to say the Yoruba was because of my life's path in doing linguistics professionally and African language and literature. I have 2 master's degrees in both of those, right? All right. Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova. 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 Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
Sangova.
Yanchi.
All right, so that was, my experience studying abroad at CIE. So I'm not sure, how old are you all? 17, 18. Y'all about to go into college, or y'all already in college?
About to, some are in.
Okay. So of course, I would recommend studying abroad. If you get the chance, it will broaden your horizons. You'll have experiences, adventures, things you'll tell your children about. You'll be able to give talks to people from Boston public schools and be like, yo, I did all this crazy stuff. Like, whoa, right? So all these things are kind of very enriching, broadens one's worldview. Because really, what I realized for myself is that when you are in the U.S., it seems to feel like the entire world is the U.S. Or like the whole world is looking at the U.S. and the U.S. is leading the way. And it's really not the case. That it's sort of like somebody who can get very sheltered. They say for one who has not traveled, she thinks her mother's soup is the best soup in the world, right? So you will go other places and realize that getting shot in the street by the cops is not a regular phenomenon, or it's not universal, right? That's not something that you have to just deal with. Getting stopped and frisked and all those types of things, getting put in prison, that's not a natural way to live. It's very unnatural, and there are other places you can live and actually feel free. So there was a brother who I went to Morehouse with, different from these brothers, and he came to Ghana, and he said something that I thought was very interesting. He said, being in Ghana, this is what it must feel like for white people in the U.S. Because he's just walking around in the store and nobody's following him around because he's black, because everybody's black, right? He's driving around and he's not looking for, all right, are the police around here? That the police will be behind you and your heart doesn't jump. And it's like, those are things that you can't pay for, right? I was up at Abri Gardens and holding my son in my lap as he was sleeping, and I realized that nobody's about to shoot my son because he has a little toy gun. You understand, like Tamir Rice? And those are things and experiences that literally, if you say you got to pay $1 billion for that, there's no price that you can put on just that peace of mind that you can have being around black people all day, all the time, right? Also connections between African people traveling. Since that time, I mentioned Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, Gambia, Egypt, South Africa. Got a chance to just travel to all different types of places. And really, it's because of my mother who brought me here to just open up my world. And this is what Brother Al is doing for you all as well. So I hope you all appreciate it. Give him a round of applause. You may be like, how come he ain't taking us to the club? We want to chill out. I don't know what you're thinking. But he's really doing a monumental service for you. And he's continuing the tradition of not only Marcus Garvey, but those before him, Martin Delaney, Paul Cuffey. I don't know if you know these names. At Morehouse, I was doing African American Studies as my major. So there are all these people. It didn't start with Marcus Garvey. The Africans on the ships were like, I don't want to be here. I want to go back, right? They're saying, I'm not trying to build up this thing for white folks. The White House was built by African people, enslaved African people. The Capitol building was built by enslaved African people. You understand? And none of them were saying, oh, let's go build up their thing for them. They were like, we want out of here, right? You had the Nat Turners. You had the Denmark Vesey's. You had the Gabriel Prosser's. You had the Charles Deslons. I don't know if you know these names. I hope you know these names. Revolutionaries. But just saying all that to say, nowadays we can actually, there's a proverb that says, a cow grazes where it is tied. A cow grazes where it is tied. And there's a story, I want to say P.T. Barnum. He talks about how he breaks elephants, that when they're young, he has like a huge chain and he will put it around their leg. So they pull until it gets raw, bloody, and then they just keep pulling. Then eventually they realize, you know what, I can't win. and they get that thought in their head from young. So by the time they get old, they just put a little rope around them. Now the elephant could break this rope and knock down the whole circus tent and just crash through, but in their head from young, they got that I have to stay where I was put. You understand? Now, I want to ask you all, are you all cows?
No.
Are you all broken elephants?
No.
So that means you don't have to stay where you're put. Somebody made a decision to kidnap your ancestors, a criminal offense, and then send them someplace they didn't want to be. Now you can either say, I'm going to keep going along with that decision, or you can say, I can make different decisions, right? Just open up your world as an idea. And then also identity as an African, as a black person, a broader identity. When I say African, I don't mean any continental African, I mean black people regardless of their location, right? So in conclusion, Mesdames, Messieurs, this is Ghana, this is CIEE, and this is Institute of African Studies where you are today. And I'd like to thank you for your time. And Sankofa?
Yenchi.
Sankofa?
Yenchi.
Sankofa?
Yenchi.
Sankofa?
Yenchi.
Very good. I think we have a couple minutes for a brief Q&A,
Yeah.
and then we move.
Yeah. Questions?
Danko.
Who's the brother that gave that phenomenal speech where he turned down the
Yeah, the Rhodes Scholarship.
yeah, what was his name?
Kwao Imana. Kwao Imana. We were all in the same Medu class. So he was valedictorian. And I think the year he came out was that same year that we were here in Ghana. So I missed the speech, but I got the recording. As soon as I got back and said, oh, you got to check this out. So Morehouse is a very, how would I put it? It's there to create Morehouse Negroes, right? Morehouse Negroes. So they wanted him to, you know, give them the speech ahead of time. So he gave them one speech. And the situation was the very first black Rhodes Scholar had gone to Morehouse, and he wanted to come and talk about, oh, it's so great that I have a Rhodes Scholarship. So he came, and he was a valedictorian. He got a 4.0 in mathematics. He's the first black PhD in Egyptology in the U.S. So he gave them one speech. But then on the day, they said, okay, here's your speech. Go on and deliver it. I said, no problem. Came with a different speech. And it's powerful. You can look at it online. I actually uploaded it online. But he talked about how basically Rhodes was a murderer, a rapist, a plunderer, a criminal, right? Now, all these white folks who, you know, they will clap for him and say, oh, he's a great explorer. No, this was a murderer, a genocidal, bloodthirsty killer, right? So he said for us, for a black person to accept a Rhodes Scholarship would be the equivalent of a so-called Jew accepting a Hitler Scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you follow along.
Yeah.
So that's the brother Kwao Imana. He's in the DC area, and they have a school there, and they're doing beautiful things with the children. Yeah. Our brother Tashango, he works at their school.
The
Yeah.
homeschool?
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
So why did you decide to go to Morehouse?
So I decided to go to Morehouse. I did, you know, they do the campus tours.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there for a campus tour. There was a brother who, I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there was a brother also from Raleigh who had gone to Morehouse. And I went down to the tour, and I wasn't too impressed with like the Morehouse campus or anything. I didn't know all that much about it. My older cousin had gone there as well. But the reason why I went there is that in between all of the universities, you have Morehouse, you have Spelman, you have Clark, you have Mo Brown at that time, which is now closed down. You have Interdenominational Theological Center. And in between those, there's a strip, they call it the strip. So the reason why I went to Morehouse is they took me to the strip and I saw all the beautiful black women there. And I said, I don't know what the Morehouse mascot is, I don't know nothing about it, but I'm about to be here. I'm being honest, that's the reason why I went to Morehouse.
Honest answer, I like that.
Yes. And then the more practical is that all throughout high school, I was always in the AP classes, the advanced placement classes, but I kind of goofed off in terms of grades. Not really, kind of. When I say kind of, because the line between a B and a C was 85, and all my grades throughout high school were like, I got an 86 or 84 or 85.1 or 84.9. It was always at the borderline. If I started getting my grade too high, I say, okay, now I can relax. I just dropped it down. Or if, you know, I started going too low, okay, now I gotta give some effort. But I was always very good at testing. So for the SATs, I got, I forget what it was, 14 something. I think it's out of 16. I may be getting it mixed up with the GREs, but
No,
it was a
you're
very, right? So I got a very high score, and colleges like to have people with high scores so they can say this year our intake, the median score was whatever. So Mr. Andre Patillo, I still remember his name, at admissions, we went down physically to see, because we hadn't heard about my application, so we went down there. And he was looking at my transcript and he said, you know, you could have done better than this. I kind of smiled like, yeah, I got it. I could have got all A's, but it was just like, you know, we chilling. I had a crew. We called ourselves the Black Ice Clique. You know, just doing what high school people do. And a lot of that is because we get our definition of what it is to be black from entertainment, from TV, from hip hop, from whatever. So we're not told that we should strive to build pyramids, because we did that in the past. We're not told that we could strive to be free, right? It's just like, this is what black people do. World star, this is what you do. And you either go along with it or you go against it, and then you just become a house Negro, and it's like those are the paths that are available to you. Long story short, he said, when I look at your test scores and I look at your grades, you could have done better than this. He walked back into the room, he came out with a letter that said full academic scholarship. So with that, I decided this is where I'm gonna go. So between the strip and the full scholarship, I said, yeah, it's a wrap.
Did you get to participate in Professor, I think it's Jeffrey's rite of passage as a freshman?
No. Professor Jeffries. What year was it?
Professor Black.
Okay, Haruna Black.
Yeah.
At that time, I don't know if he had a rites of passage at that time. I was in his drum class. He had a Guinea style drum class. So all of us were in there, you know, as well. Dun dun ba, like all these things. I'm not sure if he had a rites of passage in those years. Yeah. Is he still there? Do you know?
No, when I meet brothers from Morehouse, they always talk about how powerful his rite of passage was coming in as a freshman.
Okay. That may have been something he started later on. But he was definitely a force on campus, you know, in terms of like an African-centered thing. But with Morehouse, a lot of the African content was what you had to bring to it yourselves. So that year, this must have been like sophomore year. He was in sophomore year, senior year, because I was here for junior year, but Amadou Diallo got shot, right, in New York. So we're at an all black male school, and these are issues that affect us. And they have what's called Crown Forum on Thursdays, where everybody gets up in suits and ties, and they learn how to be good house Negroes. And we're like, we don't want to be here to say this is how to wear your tie right. We want to, you know, discuss these types of issues. And the administration wasn't trying to hear it, so we closed down the administration building. You know, we marched on it. And what ended up coming from that was a conference dealing with those types of things. But Morehouse is not set up to do that. It's named after a white man, right? It's there to create Morehouse Negroes. So what I came to when I first went to Morehouse, that was a year before my mother brought me here. Whatever you look for, you will find it. So if you want to be there and goof off, you'll find that. If you want to be, you know, around people who are about African liberation, then you'll find that. So really, it's what you make it. So basically, the African content is basically what you bring to the table.
What are your thoughts about Ghana in general? As you've lived here?
My thoughts about Ghana in general are that there's a lot of work to be done. And I think when I was here for that year of study abroad and like going to Dogon country, what I expected to find there was a place that was untouched by colonialism, by enslavement, by all these things. And I got a rude awakening that, no, here's the Coca-Cola, here are the white folks in front of the church. It's like, that's not there. So what I came to from that experience was that the world that I would like to see is a world I have to create, I have to put in the effort. So if I want people not to be brainwashed and worshiping these imaginary white boy on a stick, then I'm going to have to be the one to give them that information if I want people to support our own indigenous industries, I'm going to have to be the one, because the public food system here is designed to create all the things that we see around here that we complain about. So we say, oh, our leaders are corrupt. Oh, this is this. Oh, people are there and brain drain and all those things. We have factories that set up those types of people, that create those types of people. So if we want a different type of output, we have to have a different type of input, which is why we have an African-centered homeschool right here in North Legon, right? So just in short, my thoughts about Ghana are that it's intentionally created to be in order to serve the interests of someone who is not us. If we wanted to serve our own interests, then we're going to have to be the ones to make it that.
And with the damage done,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, do you think people are actually ready for such change?
You know, I'll look at the microcosm of African studies, where the students seem to be very open to it. Older colleagues seem to be very closed to it, right? And you find this as a pattern no matter where you are, you know, especially in education. So a lot of the students, when they start getting information, they get mad. They're like, how come I had to wait till I became 18, 19 years old to find out that the oldest book in the history of the world was written by African people here in Africa? I know about the Magna Carta and I don't know about Instructions for Tep. Why is that? How come, you know, there are women who are in medicine, and they're like, how come I had to wait till I got to Intro to African Studies to learn that the very first female physician was in Africa thousands of years ago, Lady Pesachet, right? They're like, what's up with that? I know about Florence Nightingale, I don't know about this, what's up? And we can go down the list. You go down 10 of the most important human beings ever to walk on the face of the planet who are African, oldest book, oldest, you know, multi-genius, we can go down the list. They don't know any of them. Then you just name random white folks, they know all of them. You understand? So once they start to get the information, that's where they start to have a degree of motivation, like, okay, so now what do I do with it? So we have an organization called Abibitumi, which translates to Black Power. You can go to abibitumi.com, we got an app and everything, where we bring together Africans all throughout the world who are on this tip.
It's called Abibitumi.
Abibitumi, Abibitumi, Black Power.
I'm going to probably email you. I won't say it, but
No.
definitely need to do so, because a lot of what we try to do is some orientation for this travel before people come. Because I mean, it's experience has taught us that it's kind of difficult just to bring people without any orientation, because of everything you're talking about. I mean, you know, you name 10 people in the world who are top in anything, you know, they could all wind up being Europeans. And so we need to talk about our history. We need to have some orientation to the places that we're coming. We need to have people understand that, you know, they're not coming to the forest or the jungle or whatever. Also, it's
interestingly, the brother Kwadwo Jesse, the one who got sick with the malaria, he said when he got off the plane at the airport, he was expecting to see lions and elephants walking around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, not at the airport.
No, that, you know, so it's really a job, but we made it our life's work to try to bring people to the continent and make the connection and bring them back and to make the kind of changes we're talking about. Everybody's talking about what's happening in Ghana. My position has always been that Africans in the diaspora aren't going anywhere without Africans on the continent, and Africans on the continent are not going anyplace else without Africans in the diaspora. Now, how we bridge that gulf is a matter of strategy, okay? And the first thing we need to do is to orientate people to the continent. And they need to start talking to people that are on the continent and begin to understand what these perceptions are, why they're there, and how we break them down and move them out of the way first. So that's the work that I'm dedicated to. I mean, and these trips are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of that kind of an introduction. So that's why I do what I do and tolerate what I tolerate from people.
That's beautiful. And there's a speech, y'all can look it up, by Malcolm X at the OAU, where he makes that same point, that, you know, continental Africans are never going to be fully free unless Africans in the diaspora are, and vice versa. Very powerful, and he articulates it better than I ever could, so just look up that speech, Malcolm X at the OAU. but it's absolutely right. If you look at other people, like for example, Chinese people aren't getting shot down in the street like black people are. That's because when someone looks at the Chinese people, they look at, this is a representative of a superpower that has nukes, right? So if you do something to one Chinese person, you may have a mushroom cloud over DC next year. You understand? So, and then you can look at any group like that. If you see an Israeli, whatever, people don't see just that person. They see, you know, that whole state of Israel, Zionist state, and so forth and so on. And that's what every people, you have to have a type of base before you're respected in the world. And people don't respect black people because we don't have any type of base. There's no repercussions. If I shoot you, y'all march. And with even your march, you're going to get the markers for your signboards at the Walmart, which is going to finance the bullets that I'm going to buy for y'all.
And you have to get a permit.
And you got to get a permit. Very good. Very good. You got to, you know, get the hotel rooms. So they're like, yeah, another march. We're going to have an economic boom. You understand? So these are some of the things that we think of. So when they see a black person, they need to see there's a superpower. And this is what Marcus Garvey talked about, right? And even before him, at the 1900 conference, Pan-African conference, they talked about a great central Negro state in Africa. And they were looking at Congo at that time. And the whole thrust was, we have to have some type of back. When they see a black person, they need to know, if I shoot this black person, the whole East Coast is going to be in the Atlantic Ocean. Don't mess with them.
With that being, and this is a more complex question, so I've often thought about, and Tishon and I have had long, extensive conversations about this, but the term identifying as black as a race, and, you know, without getting into the Moorish, you know, piece of it, but what is a term often that we can use that will unify us? Because often that term that holds the pieces together for all of the continental and folks, the diaspora, often that is the biggest issue. Mm-hmm. What is the name that we utilize in the term identify?
Sankofa?
Yanji.
Sankofa?
Yanji.
Sankofa?
Yanji.
This is a very good question. It's a very good question. And if you look at African languages throughout the continent, the words for African and the words for black are the same. So we have a problem as long as we're speaking English, because black is one thing and African is a different thing. But if you look at the Chi language, for example, Obibini, the BB translates to black. To say Obibini is to say literally a black person, but that's the exact way to say an African. You understand? If you look at the Bambara language, Farafina, so Farafin is black, and then Na is to talk about this is the land of the black people, right? So you can look at that. So the black and the African are linked. It's the same concept. If you look at Yoruba, Adulawo, it's coming from Dudu, which is to be black, and Adulawo, those who are black in color. So the way to say Africa, Ile Adulawo, the land of those who are black in color, right? If you look at Wolof out of Senegal, they say Nit Kunyur, a human who is black. That's the same way to say African, right? If you look at Kikongo out of Congo, they'll say Bandombe, or Ndombe singular, Bandombe plural. So Ndombe is to be black, right? And the same way to say African is to say black, the same way to say black is to say African. Now, you can look at some of those as, you know, perhaps those are modern things. And then you look at Kemet, right? And the people themselves call themselves Kemetiyu, which just means black people, right? So, and the land is Kemet, so there's always this link between we are black people and this is the land, or this is the nation, place of black people, right? So I think the first thing that we have to do is that we have to get beyond English, which is a very difficult thing to do in all these white languages, because it's built in, the confusion is built in, right? Are we black, are we African, are we this? If we're calling ourselves by anything in English, we're gonna have problems. But if we use any type of African language, because those are languages that are conceptualized by us and for us for our benefit, you understand? So you're not trying to, you know, fit a square peg into a round hole. It's built in that this is, you know, for us. So I think, that, well, definitely the oldest term, you can go to the pyramid text, is Kemetiyu, right? The pyramid text of Pepi II. And it says, you stand at the forefront of the black people like an Apis bull. That's the oldest attestation I found of that term, black people, Kemetiyu. You You understand? So I think any language that expresses that black and African are the same thing is something that we can work with. The problem with African is that there are people who talk about Pan-Africanism, but they mean whoever happens to be on the African continent, whether they're indigenous black people or whether they're the invaders, the Arabs, the Dutch Boers in South Africa. They say, yeah, we're all African. So you're talking about Pan-Africanism, you're talking about black people. They talking about Pan-Africanism, they mean you're out. And we saw that happen in 2016 where Haiti applied to join the African Union and they were rejected on the grounds that they're not African enough. Haiti is more African than all these nation states here put together. And we owe them a debt.
We do.
And that's a whole different conversation, but we can go into that. And there's a reason why Napoleon invaded both Haiti and Egypt, because both of those were galvanizing forces of black people who knew that they were black, and they united on the basis of being black, and they defeated their white enemies on the basis of we're all black people. So he was very clear that I'm invading Haiti, I'm invading Egypt to stop the forward march of black people in the world. You understand? So, you know, these are some of the things that I think come up. In that same year, Morocco applied to join the African Union, and Morocco has 3 times more enslaved black people than Libya does. 3 times more, right? And Morocco applied to join, and guess what happened?
They got it.
Absolutely. And this is what happens when we don't know who we are, right? We'll think that these Arabs in Morocco who are enslaving black people are African, just because they happen to be on the African continent. So we have to have a word that means black people, so it excludes our enemies who happen to be on stolen land, and it includes black people regardless of their location, right? So if I'm using English, I'll write African equals and then an equal sign and black to let you know I mean this, these are synonyms, but I don't have to go through all that juggling if I'm just using the African language to start with.
Do you think the Ghana should lead the way for the reconciliation between the African black people in the diaspora and the African continent? Do you think Ghana should lead the way?
That would be good, and you know, some of the work I'm doing here is towards that goal. The difficulty is, so you had the 1900 Conference of Pan-African, the Pan-African Conference of 1900, Henry Sylvester Williams. That was about black people uniting. You know, it had 7 different goals, and you can actually read up on those goals in the conference. The Pan-Africanism, the term Pan-Africanism was hijacked in the 1945 Pan-African Congress, and that's where it went from the original Pan-Africanism, which meant black people regardless of location, to this current Pan-Africanism, which means continentalism, anyone who happens to be on the continent, whether or not they're black or not. You understand? So the challenge, and you know, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was at the forefront of that, marrying an Arab, all those types of things. So it is very difficult. As a matter of fact, we have a conference of African Studies Association of Africa, and I'm suggesting the theme of Pan-Africanism or continentalism, right, for the conference, because we have to hash out these debates, because after the 1945 conference, the term Pan-Africanism got hijacked wholesale, and that, you know, that situation between Haiti and Morocco is the natural, logical end result of the hijacking of that term. So we're all black people, we're talking about Pan-Africanism. These other people, they're like, yeah, Pan-Africanism, but they don't mean what you mean, right? They mean keep the black people on the diaspora out. Then you got the boogeyman story of, well, look at Liberia. If the black people come back, then it'll be a war like in Liberia. But then there's a book called Black on Black Violence by Amos Wilson, Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. And you don't see black people from the diaspora in Rwanda, or in Eastern Congo, or in Central African Republic, and we can go down the list, or Northern Nigeria, Boko Haram. So to just look at that one as, oh, this is just a magical thing and it's by itself, all of those things are black people fighting each other, and the ultimate beneficiary are the whites who get the diamonds for free, who get the coltan in Eastern Congo for free, who get the uranium in northwestern Niger for free, so that conflict up in Mali, that all those things tend to be tied to the resources that they want to get for free. I'll just give you guns to go fight these other people, and you don't have to pay for it. Just give it to me and those resources that I want, the diamonds and everything else, platinum, so forth.
So that means what that used to happen in the past actually hasn't changed now. It's still repeating itself. because
Yeah.
they brought the guns to exchange the views.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
forth.